David George Brooke, he's the Brooker, that gratitude guy. He's been a speaker, teacher, life coach, and best-selling author for over 25 years. He specializes in teaching people the benefits of living a life of gratitude, and specifically the advantages of using a daily gratitude journal to record your daily life blessings. As the author of the Brooker's Daily Gratitude Journal and co-author of the Amazon International bestseller Ready, Aim, Captivate, David will show us the transformative power of gratitude, which creates a very healthy coping mechanism in a world of so many destructive ones. He's got over 200 gratitude videos on YouTube, and over 30,000 viewers have seen his message. So please welcome David Brooke, the Brooker, that gratitude guy.
Thank you, Mike. First of all, thank you very much, Mike, for inviting me. I always appreciate getting a chance to get out and send out this message about gratitude. For me, September 29th, 1998 was a Tuesday. I woke up and I looked around. I couldn't find my wife. She was normally in bed next to me. And I looked in a couple of rooms, and just as I was looking, trying to find her, my 4-year-old son comes up and goes, "Where's Mom?" I mean, I don't know, let's go find her. As we walk down the hallway, then my 14-year-old son, Kyle, comes in. "Where's Mom?" I don't know. So as we look around some back rooms, and we walk downstairs. I see her down in front of the washer and dryer, face down. And she's kind of curled up, and I can't find what's going on, can't figure out what's going on. I come down and I roll her over. All this stuff's coming out of her mouth. I said, call Medic 1, call the police, call fire, call everybody. And within a matter of 5 minutes, our house was teeming with medic people. They work on her, they take her outside, they put her out in the living room, rather, the rec room area down there, and they've got tubes, and they've got all these paddles and all this kind of thing. They're doing this shock thing, and this is all feels like a horrible, horrible nightmare for me. And so as I realized later, any of you in this room, and I'll guarantee you there's some of you that have gone through similar things, anytime I've got a room this size or bigger, you know how time loses all measure. And so I wasn't sure how much time had gone by. Connor couldn't stop crying, Kyle couldn't stop crying, and the little short fire person, lady, comes over to me and she says, "Mr. Brooke, we've been working on your wife for an hour and a half, and there's still no heartbeat. Would you like us to continue?" And right then, you realize that I had never before in my life had to make a life and death decision for anybody. And it hit me, and I said, "No, you can stop." And she was dead. And I think what made it so impactful for me is that my life, I had had so many different things that happened to me involving death that I was beginning to wonder what was the point. And it was so frustrating for me, to say the very least. My father had committed suicide, my mother had died of cancer, a bunch of good friends of mine in school had died, on and on and on. And I thought, what is the deal here? You know, I mean, this life, and what made it so sad is probably half of those 20 or 25 deaths that affected me were self-inflicted at some point or some way. Suicide, overdosing on pills, and that kind of thing. So I started thinking, you know, at some point I'm going to have to figure out how to cope. And I'm going to need a good coping mechanism, because so many people had not found a good coping mechanism. And as it turned out with Dana, my wife, she had overdosed on Vicodin and OxyContin, these prescription medications that she'd been taking. And I knew that she'd been taking some of them, but I had no idea how this could affect her. She was 38 years old. And so as I went back and I looked at it, and I thought, you know, somewhere along the line, I'm going to have to figure this out, because my father committed suicide, that's how he died. Other people were in accidents where they were drinking and so on. And I thought, I cannot let this define my life. I cannot let this be the legacy I'm going to have for Connor and Kyle with their mom passing away. And as I figured out later, she'd gotten hooked on this stuff, had hidden it from me, and anybody, again, anytime I speak to groups of this size of you, there's always people that come up and talk to me afterwards that have had a similar experience, know how insidious this can be. So I started thinking about, at some point, I'm going to have to come up with a coping mechanism, or I'm not going to make it. Because what happens in situations like this is when people are passing on around you, and all these negative things are happening, if you don't figure out a way, especially with children, but even in general, if you don't figure out a way to bounce back from this, you're going to have a really tough time. So I was going to have to find something along the way. And I realized what happened is that in this particular case, I ended up losing everything. It wasn't just Dana. It was the entire, she had tapped all her savings because she was buying these pills. And people constantly ask, well, how did you not know about this? How did you not see what the story was here? And people are very, very tricky. that are involved with drugs or alcohol or any of these types of things. So it makes it very, very difficult. But I think what I realized is at some point, I'm just going to have to not give up on this deal because I've got to set a good example. And I've got to raise these boys myself, and I can't be around without having that example be the best one. And after I'd seen what happened to Dana and many, many other friends and people that I knew, I was going to have to do a better job. And along the way, I found gratitude. But before I get to that, I think what is interesting, when you lose everything, I've been a multi-millionaire by the time I was 30. I learned how to fly, had my own airplane, lost everything. Everything was gone. So there wasn't only the wife, it was, we'd gone from a nice fancy house to live in a little apartment, one bedroom with two of us sleeping in one room and Kyle sleeping out on the couch. So at some point you have to make that decision. Are you going to bounce back from this, or are you going to let this get to you? And I remember thinking that I'm going to have to find something that's a healthy coping mechanism because there's so many negative ones. But what I found is so interesting is it always depends on how you look at it. And all of you, and I speak usually to groups once or twice a week, it's the same thing. We all go down this life path, and you're going to have to figure out how you're going to have to deal with this. So one thing I'd like to do very quickly, if you would, in terms of how we look at things, I'm not going to make anybody come up front, so don't get freaked out. But I'd like you to all stand up for a second, if you would, and just do a little exercise for me, just for a second. This is all about how you look at things. So if you can take your right hand, left hand, put it in the air and start turning it in a clockwise manner. Like this, okay? So does everybody know which way the clock goes? we can wait. Look at your neighbor. Okay, so now that you've got that's the clockwise way, right? So start bringing it down to your head and then about to your eye level. Still going clockwise. Okay, now take it down. Now take it down to your waist. Now what direction is it going? You can sit down. Anyway, was it going the same direction down there? Well, if you look at it up here, for those that may need help, this was clockwise, this was counterclockwise. And it always depends on how you look at it. So I had to decide that I was going to do something that was going to make a big difference. And I remember thinking that unless I get this thing figured out, I'm not going to be a very good dad for Connor and Kyle. So I realized that it's going to take as long as it takes and that you just can't give up. And so many people I met, including Dana in many ways, my wife, had given up. And so I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to have to develop this. And along the way, I got this idea of gratitude. And I'll get to the gratitude journal in a second, which I have over here. But I realized if you don't frame your life around what's good in your life, if you go around finding everything that's bad, and I was on the ferry coming over this morning, and I think it's over 25 significant people in my life have died in the last, well, I'm 63, what am I now, 63? Yeah, have died in the last 20 or 30 years, much more than I ever would have thought. In fact, by the way, who has the Queen Anne Grizzly car? And Queen, what year?
I'm 2 years older than you.
66?
65.
65, I graduated in 68. And of my class, I saw the Grizzly thing, oh my gosh, it's a fellow Grizzly. The high school has been closed for, 20 or so years. 550 kids in my class, 150 of them are dead already, didn't even make it to their 60s. So it really, really impacted, and so many of them were ones involved with overdoses and taking their own life and so forth. So I think what happened to me is I realized that you're going to have to get tough in this world, and you have to figure it out. Colonel Sanders didn't start KFC till his 60s. Walt Disney was turned down, I think, 200 or 300 times by banks about trying to put together Disney World. And Sylvester Stallone with Rocky and all those, he became very, very famous. You're going to have to figure out a way to hang in there. And the reason that I started to realize that gratitude is going to be such an important piece of my world is because if you want to be negative, anybody been around negative people at all? A couple of hands? Yeah. And it's fine. It's a free choice. You can do that, but it's not really fun to be around. And I remember Connor, especially at 4, used to constantly ask me, what happened to Mommy? And I couldn't say. And so what had happened is with the overdose, when they did the autopsy, 65 pills were in her stomach. And I had no idea how this, I had been completely blindsided. Because in fact it was so sad, and again, with all the groups I speak to, there's always people I know that have been down this road, unfortunately. When you're talking to somebody and their head just starts to nod off like this. And I go, what was wrong? And I'm fine. You're the one with the problem. You're the one with the problem, David. It's not me. So as it turned out, I realized that at some point, I'm going to have to hang in there, and I'm going to have to be the best dad possible, even though Dana had passed away. But I looked at my two sons, Connor in particular, who was 4, had a horrible time. And we go in to get assessed, and the teachers tell me, we need to assess your child. He's really screwed up. I said, his mother died, for crying out loud. Yeah, well, we got all sorts of problems. Bring him in here. So we do this assessment. He's like 6 years old now. And they said they put him through all these tests, and it was like 8 hours in this school in Seattle. And when they're done, he goes and waits in the car, and I come out and I talk to him, or go into the office, and they go, we got all sorts of problems. He's messed up, he's this, he's that. And I said, well, when they were done, I said, I was a decent athlete. Connor is going to be a great, he's not going to be any athlete, anytime, ever, in your entire life. You might as well get over it right now at 6 years old. That's what you're up against. And I walked out to the car and just burst into tears. His mother just died a few months ago. How do you know he's not going to be any good? Well, then as time went on, he continued to struggle. And I was a decent athlete, but he had a heck of a time. He couldn't throw, he couldn't hit, he couldn't catch, he couldn't run. It was terrible. And I would sit in the stands, and he'd strike out, the ball was here, he'd swing here. And he'd go back into the dugout and put his face into the corner, just ball. And for those of you that have had something like that, I'm sure there are people in the room that have. You can't do anything. You can't go run down to the dugout and everything. But eventually it came to this one particular game. And here is every parent's either dream or nightmare, depending on how you view it. And it was the bottom of the 7th. They're down by 1. The bases are loaded. And guess who comes up to bat? It's Connor, my son. And I just remember going, just a walk would be great. Just a walk would be fine. Actually, there was 2 guys on base. So I didn't, just don't strike out. So ball 1, strike 1, ball 2, strike 2, ball 3, full count. And I'm sitting, my little heart's just pumping through my chest in the stands. The next pitch, he rips down the third baseline. It goes just inside the bag, goes into left field. The guy from third comes around. The guy from second comes around, slides in under the tag, and they win the game 8-7 because they'd been down 8-6, or 7-6, excuse me. And he goes to second base. He could never even play. The teams come out. His team comes out, mobs second base, puts him on his shoulders, and takes him off the field. And I couldn't even talk for a couple hours. And when we got home, Dad, what did you think of the game? And I said, Connor, it was phenomenal. But I said, more importantly, it's about the fact you never gave up. I've never seen somebody strike out as many times as you have. And what's sad, I was a decent athlete, but the ball was here, he'd strike here. It wasn't even close. And yet he somehow got this pitch and sent it down inside the third base bag, and they won the game. And they actually carried him off on their shoulders. But when he got that lesson, I decided I was going to have to figure out a way around this, because I'm going to be able to describe this with people, and it's going to be about gratitude. And that's why as I went along, I started thinking there's a couple of things I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to really figure out how to persevere. I learned how to fly, and I was flying an airplane down to Ocean Shores. You actually kind of pass over Bremerton on your way down. And I got into this really big cloud bank, and all of a sudden I was completely engulfed in clouds. And I went to turn, and I started to turn, almost went up sideways, and I looked at my directional gyro, and I was in a 60-degree bank turn, and I thought I was straight and level. And for those of you that are pilots in the room, when you get vertigo, it's a scary thing. You don't know what up is and so on. But I remember thinking, you better pay attention to those lessons you've learned in life, and in this case, learning how to fly. And I pulled up on the yoke to climb. I was only a couple thousand feet, and then the stall horn went off because I was so scared. I was pulling up so far. Now the plane's going to stall. And I'm still in the clouds. You can't see a thing. 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. And I'm still in the clouds. And I actually had 3 people with me. And they're all just laughing. They think it's all funny. I want to go, we're about to die. You know. This is not funny. You know. And my buddy, he's going, this is no big deal. You just look at the instruments. And I'm just going, you don't understand. We're probably going to hit a mountain anytime soon here. 10,000, 11,000, 13,000 feet, actually 12 and a half. We pull out of the clouds, and I can see Seattle in the distance. I said, I think we're going to head back to Seattle. So we've been heading down to Ocean Shores. And I realized how close we were to dying. And what it came back to is never giving up. And that's the philosophy that I used when I was dealing with Connor and with Kyle and with Dana's death. Because of all these other deaths and mom and dad's and all these friends, my doctor died of an overdose, and my two best friends died in a car accident the night I graduated from Queen Anne High School in 1968. And it just was so sad, and I thought, you've got to figure out a way to do this. And for those of us that have children in the room, you know that who are they looking at for their role model? It's us, as parents. And there might be some other people, but primarily it's parents. So I decided that, you know what, I'm going to have to stick with it, and I think I'm going to have to figure out a way to get this brain cleared out and then get gratitude in this place, because gratitude is what can do it. And I thought, but first of all, you got to get your brain cleared out. And one of the ways you do that is to put all this negative junk behind you. I ran a business for a while, and this gal that was working there, I was always preaching, are you the one or are you the 19 out of 20? In fact, who was I talking to? Shoot, I'm drawing a blank. It might have been, I forget. Anyway, oh yeah, there you are. Where's she? That's embarrassing. Anyway, I'm right here. That's why I couldn't see it. Anyway, Chris, that's right. Gosh, how embarrassing. Anyway, I was talking to Chris about Pete Carroll and sports and not giving up and how you approach things. And I think one of the things is I realize that if you throw in the towel, you know, that's the easy thing. And unfortunately, people do it. And when Dana had gotten hooked on prescription medication, that's an easy way to go. But if you tough it out, and if you're the one, if you're not the 19, I've realized that later that it seemed to be 1 out of 20. That's what we were talking about too, because are you the one or are you the 19? Chris was saying that even trying to get a hold of him, I always found one person out of about 20. Well, I noticed it was the same for me. And I thought, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get on the other side of this? So I had a business, and there's a really neat little gal that worked there. And she always talked about, well, you always talk about, am I going to be the 1 or am I going to be the 19? And that's why it was funny what Chris said, because it was that exact proportion. And she was this cute little gal, and I had an auto detail shop. But then one day she comes to me and she goes, well, I'm pregnant. And it's by one of the guys in the shop. And I went, oh, good Lord. And I just didn't know what she was going to do. She says, I'm going to move back to Texas, and I'm going to go back and be with but I'm going to be the one. You watch, Mr. Brooke. I will not be the 19, because I've been hearing you preach that for 5 or 6 years. I will not be the 19. She goes, I'm going to go back to Texas, and I'm on my baby, and I'm going to turn my whole life around, and you watch. I will be that person. Because it seemed to be, as I was saying to Chris, it just seemed to be that kind of proportion. It seemed to be 1 out of 20. So the time goes by, and it's a year later, and I get a call from, her name was Tracy. She goes, it's Tracy from Texas. And she goes, I just want to let you know I turned my life around. And I got it, thanks to you. And I'm, well, that's fantastic. And she remember, I got pregnant. It wasn't real cool, but I got pregnant. I had my baby. That's fantastic. What's your baby's name? I think John or something like that. That's incredible. How's John doing? He's doing great. And I want you to know I have a new man in my life. You inspired me. I have a new man in my life. I'm not going with these flaky guys anymore. What's his name? His name's Bob. What's Bob do? Well, he's on work release right now. I remember just holding the phone and just thinking, at some point, when are you going to understand you're kind of known by the company you keep? And it's so very important. So what happened to me with all these things that happened to my father's death with a suicide, he put a shotgun in his mouth, it just, example after example after example of things I've dealt with. And I thought, I'm going to have to figure something out. So when one day somebody says to me, do you have a gratitude journal? I go, what's that? You know, it's a journal you write in. It's a gratitude journal. And I've heard of journaling and so forth, but I'd never heard of a gratitude journal. So you had to write in it. That would make a big difference for you. And I remember I bought one, and I sell them now, but this happens all the time. I bought one, I put it on the shelf by my desk, and it sat there for a year or so before I started to write in it. And I noticed, though, when I started to write in it, things started to really happen. And I noticed things that were always framed around being grateful. And I remember thinking, I actually came up with a quote that's in the book. If you think about it, it's like a dream. If you talk about it, it inspires you. But if you write about it, it empowers you. And that's what happens when we write. And that's why we took notes in high school and things that we do, we follow up, is because it gets it planted in your brain. And it made such a huge difference for me. And I noticed a lot of things started to really happen that were really kind of just gave me the chills. I'd lost everything after Dana had passed away. And on June 4th, think it was '08, I remember thinking, I need to get a new job by the end of the year. I'd lost everything. I mean, we were renting an apartment, and 3 of us were living in one little one-bedroom apartment. It was terrible. Everything was gone because of what happened to Dana and her death. And I kept thinking, I know I'll get a job by the end of the year, and I cried every single day. I'm so grateful for the job that I have that I'll get before the end of the year. And then on December 30th, about 3 in the afternoon, I get a call from Lowe's, which I noticed there was one down here. We'd like you to come and manage our store in Mount Vernon. And I had 12 hours left because I said I would get a job before the end of the year. I was so grateful for it. And things kept happening over and over again to the point where it almost gave me the chills because of so many things that happened that were the result of me being thankful and being grateful. And we live in this world where people complain about all the time about what they don't have. And one of the things that I notice is that I do this video every single morning, and it goes out on all these channels and everything, and it's always about 2 minutes long. And the whole point of this video is, what are we grateful for? Sometimes it's even the weather. I mean, the sun's coming out. I mean, there's clouds up there, but sometimes there's a sun on the other side of those clouds. But we don't think of it that way. And we get so caught up in everything we don't have instead of what we do have. And I've lost so many people, and so many things have happened to me that were negative, but I choose to go the route of seeing what I have as that glass half full versus half empty. And the journal makes such a big difference, and there were so many other things that happened. I realized it has to become like a daily habit. Like, I don't think many of us in this room probably didn't leave our house today without brushing our teeth. But if you start adding things to your daily habit, it's amazing how fast that can change everything. So what I'd like to do is I want to give away a couple of books. And so if you'll take out your cards you have, please, any business cards you have, because I'm going to do a quick drawing for books, because I've done a few books, and I'd like to see who's the fortunate one today. And one of them is this gratitude journal, which is okay. So here's the basket.
Do you wish to use the basket of cards that we have and put anybody in there that hasn't put it in? Or did you want to keep
No, I'll keep them if you don't mind too. In fact, I will tell you what I do with these too, is that, and if you in fact think of this real quick, I've got 3 books I want to draw for very quickly. And I do send out a Monday morning video, and actually I should say this real quick, if you don't want to get the video, put an X on your card. I send out every Monday, it's 2 minutes long, it goes out on YouTube, and it's a different subject every single week on things to be grateful for. And I have a lot of followers on there, which I really like. But I love to send those videos out, and I get a lot of response on them. And it's just a real quick little hit on everything in your life that you have to be grateful for. And somebody said to me one day, I've got, I think, 230 of them now. They go, how do you keep coming up with different subjects? And I go, how do I keep coming up with different subjects to be grateful for? That's not too hard. There's always something. The other one the other day I thought is the weather. I know there's clouds up there, but isn't there sun on top of those clouds? I think there are. So anyway, so let me do that real quickly. And let me just tell you why we're getting those together. I have 3 things I'm going to do. First of all, this is the Brooker's Daily Gratitude Journal. This is kind of what started it all. This takes 9.5 minutes a day to write in it. Sometimes if you're a quick writer, 7.5 minutes. And this is what's really changed my life. In fact, here is mine. I know we don't have the podium here, and somebody actually looked at me and said, so you actually write in it? I go, I'm the gratitude guy. I have to write in this. That's like a teacher not preparing an assignment or something. It's like, so there's, in fact, I wrote it, I was on the ferry coming over from Seattle, and it makes such a huge difference. So this gratitude journal has changed my life. I have probably, these last about 3 months, so I probably have, I don't know, about 30 of them by now, something like that. And it's a very quick hit, 7, 8, 9 minutes. But boy, when you start every sentence with, I'm so grateful for this, or I'm so thankful for that, or I'm so glad that I was invited over to Bremerton. I mean, it doesn't matter. You can't believe how many things will reframe and refocus in your life. So let me do...
Look that way.
This, yeah, okay. Okay, so let's do the gratitude journal. First of all, hold on. Elisa, what a cool name. Elisa, I love that name. So you get a gratitude journal, Lisa? You betcha. And I will sign that for you later. I could be famous someday, but we'll see. Second of all, this is something I did recently called Happiness Starts with Gratitude. And this one is the videos I've done been converted over to the written word. And so this is the 50 gratitude lessons to direct, inspire, and empower you. And it tells you a little story every single day about something to be grateful for, how gratitude can really, really help your life. And let me tell you, we have I come across a lot of people, and I speak to a lot of groups. There's a lot of reasons to be sad. There's a lot of reasons to be negative. It's a tough world we live in. And it's in the economy and different things are bouncing back, but it is a struggle. But if you focus on what you're grateful for, it's amazing how much that'll change things. Kenneth Shudlar, something like that. Kenneth, hi Kenneth. There you are, sir. I'll be happy to sign that for you. All right, and the last one, I'm really proud of this. This is called Ready, Aim, Captivate, and this is a interview series they did with 75 hand-picked authors, one of which was me, which I was really, really excited about. Deepak Chopra and a bunch of really, really influential people on how you can help people influence their lives. And in my case, of course, it's gratitude. And this went out about 6 months ago, and in the first month or so, it was a bestseller. So it was really neat. So really very proud of that book. So okay, so let's see who gets this one. Just remember, the signature I put in the book could be worth something someday. You just never know. Christopher. Oh my God. That's funny. You told me your name was Chris. Your more formal name is Christopher. Anyway, so essentially, this is how I kind of break down the gratitude piece. Is that initially, it's important to understand how gratitude can change your life. We're all around negative people. I had a father that I'd go, "Good morning, Dad. What's good about it?" And he later committed suicide. So, you have a choice every day when you get up, whether you want to have a positive or negative attitude. It can change from day to day, but you really have control over it. When you start writing for 7 or 8 minutes a day, I'm so grateful for this, I'm so grateful for my health. My sons are now 18 and 28, and they're both doing phenomenal. And I'm so grateful to have such a close relationship with both of them, but I give a lot of the credit to gratitude because they learn from me, and they're both they talk as fast as I do, and they're both, they want to go out and do some speaking like I've done and so forth, so it makes a big difference. But it does take a long time, and that's something that people don't seem to understand, that you've got to wait and see when the message gets delivered to you, because each one of us is different. And I think that this never give up concept, I'm always fascinated by people that give up so easily. They say that the average gold miner quits like 2 or 3 inches before the vein of gold. And there's all these examples I've heard about people that don't hang in there long enough. But you've got to clean out your brain, and you've got to make room for gratitude, and you've got to get rid of those old thoughts. There's a great analogy I think about when you get back in your cars today. You look at the windshield, all these cars out there. Of course, I saw the Queen Anne Grizzly car out there. And you got this huge windshield. It's about 2 feet deep and about 4 or 5 feet wide. And you got a rear view mirror. It's about like this. Well, kind of keep your life in proportion like that. About 90% of it's up in front of you. Learn from that stuff behind you. Pay attention to the guy behind you. But don't focus on it. Because you can get stuck in the past. And that'll make a huge, huge difference. It'll really slow you down. So the thing that I always want people to know is that you have a tool like a gratitude journal that can make such a difference. And when you actually write it down every day, I'm so grateful for this, I'm so thankful for that, it actually reframes and refocuses your viewpoint into something that's very positive. And so it makes a big difference. But people say, well, Dave, I do my stuff into a tape recorder. I think gratitude thoughts. Well, that's fine. It's better than nothing. But this gratitude journal, if you write it down, it's just amazing how much it can help you. So it's so important to make sure that you not only first help yourself, but you got to help yourself first to help others. There's the old line in the airplane about, that's why they tell you to put the mask on you first and then put it on your child. Because it makes such a difference. Make sure you're living this life too and being grateful. And I think that the last part of it is when you share gratitude, it enhances the experience. Anything you share in your life enhances it. Think about Christmas and all those holidays of the years when presents are involved. Is there anything better than watching somebody's face when you've gotten the present that you've given to them and watch their reaction versus the present you get? So I really realized how much gratitude has saved me. And I think about that whole idea of sharing it, why sharing it's so important. That same plane I was flying down in Ocean Shores, And I noticed that all of a sudden I was supposed to be VFR, which is visual flight rules, and I got stuck between these cloud layers. And I think the lesson is I shouldn't go down to ocean shores. You should be clearly, it's not a place I should fly, but they didn't figure that out until later. At least I'm still here to tell the story. But the cloud layers started coming together, and all of a sudden I was in the clouds. And you're not supposed to be in the clouds. For those pilots that are here, visual flight rules and instrument flight rules are quite different. And all of a sudden I was just holding on, and then the sun thing came in, and this kaleidoscope of color hit me, and I held on to the yoke just like this, and my eyes were like that, and I went, oh my God. And what was it about that? And it was every color in the rainbow. It's the most incredible kaleidoscope I'd ever seen. And as fast as I came in, I popped out of it on the other side. It was probably 30 seconds. And I looked, and I went, oh my God, there's the ocean shores, and the water, and the blue sky. And I turned to my right. And wasn't that like the coolest thing you've ever... And I was by myself. So I was the only person that ever got to see that. And I realized how sad that story was because I didn't get to share that. And when you get to share things, and when you get to share an experience like that, when you get to share gratitude, when you get to those of us that are parents in the room, when you get to share that and show people how to live their life, and you live it through gratitude, a gratitude journal is a gigantic help. It makes a huge, huge difference. And I'll tell you, you will not be sorry. Because gratitude changed my life, and it can change yours too. Thank you so much.
So I want to know if you ever spoke at the Ocean Shores Chamber of Commerce.